Welcome to the NF Northeast podcast. Today we'll focus on education. I'm Lori Ryan. I'm the chair of the NF Northeast Board of Directors and also a parent of a child with NF. I'm pleased to welcome Meredith Chambers, patient and family educator in the neurofibromatosis program at Boston Children's Hospital. NF Northeast also helps to support her role there, and we're happy to do so. I'm sure many of you may know Meredith and worked with her to navigate the educational system with your child. But we have a few questions for her. To start, Meredith, what are some of the common challenges families and learners have right now with social distancing, homeschooling, and the disruption of our current situation?
So I've reached out to a lot of our families to find out, what's been going on with them, what's working, what's not working. So I think some of the big challenges are, first of all, multi-children in the home, trying to share computers. Are there enough computers? Sharing space. What does their space look like? Some people have very little space. Some people have enough. Monitoring children that are not being taught at the moment, and then children that are, and trying to help them. So that's been a very big challenge. I think probably the biggest challenge I've heard is I'm not a teacher, and I'm not sure I'm teaching my kids the right things, which of course, no parent, if that's not their vocation, then they're not a teacher. So, worrying a lot about that, and how is that going to look in September? Should the kids be going back? Am I doing my kid a disservice, or am I not? So there's a lot of challenges that way. And then also it's been challenging for some families to navigate the whole resource bank that everyone's been sending. So everyone's gotten many, many resources, and they're not sure what to use, sometimes not sure how to use the resources, what are more pertinent, what aren't. So that's been very challenging for families as well. I think now that time has passed a little bit and schools have gotten a little bit more organized as far as how they're going to teach, what's expected to be taught, special ed's a little bit different than gen ed, that maybe that's not such a big concern as before, where teachers are a little bit more on track with what each student is supposed to be learning. And also I think it's been challenging for parents to manage all the Zoom meetings. There's been many Zoom meetings for people, and that's been challenging for a lot of people. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What are some of the strategies that may work or have worked with families and learners to help them through this?
So that's a really good question. There's a lot of strategies, and of course it's really family-centered. Every family's different, but some of the strategies that have been very helpful are to keep a schedule. Some parents I've heard, and I kind of like this idea, actually have their kids get up at the same time school would be and get dressed for school, and not just in their pajamas hanging around, kind of get a schedule and a routine going, breakfast at the same time and all of that, so that, because kids really need a schedule and they like a schedule. So keeping a tight schedule is kind of a good thing for a lot of families. That's been a strategy that's been very helpful, especially families that have multiple children and or young kids. Young kids tend to need it a little bit more. The older kids, middle school, high school, can kind of manage themselves a little bit better. So keeping a schedule has been very helpful. Getting outside and exercising has been huge for families, and they love the ability to go to school, so to speak, for half an hour, whatever it may be, and then go outside and do, some jumping jacks, or take a walk around the neighborhood, or, just get some type of exercise in, and then come back and get back to work, to what they're doing. And they find the focusing's been a lot more manageable that way. So that's really been helpful for families. I think the interaction with the teachers gives parents in particular a lot of calm and some reassurance that they don't have to carry this whole load, because it is a lot for the parents. So having the kids interact with the teachers, I think is really helpful for both parents and the kids to kind of stay connected to the teacher and or classroom. A lot of the teachers are doing classroom visits as well, and that's been helpful for them to kind of connect with their friends. Some families have chosen to do some play dates via Zoom, or lunch dates during school time, which has been helpful so that the kids can play with their friends virtually for the younger kids. And then for the high school kids, it's always nice to see their friends anyway. They have a lot more options on how to access their friends, but kind of nice to see them in a home/school setting. So that's been very helpful as well for some of the families to work on. So I think those are the main ones that have been very helpful for families. And also, all the families have been very appreciative. Not all schools, surprisingly, are able to give all the kids computers. So not everybody's on Zoom or some other facsimile. So some kids are just getting packets, and that's very challenging as well. Packets are not quite as entertaining. They're not quite as interesting to do. And it's been difficult sometimes for teachers to get the packets to the kids. So teachers are parents rather, are very appreciative of whatever does come from school, so that they can kind of parse through what's there and help their kids with that. So there's a lot of good and a lot of challenge mixed in.
Right, right. Now, many of the kids may be on IEPs or 504 plans. What do you suggest to try to help them stay on track with these plans and have them reviewed and updated as needed?
It's a really good question, and something that I've spent a lot of time in a lot of Zoom meetings with Department of Ed, the Federation for Children with Special Needs, a Special Needs Advocacy Network, trying to figure out all of this, in Department of Ed trying to figure it out as well. I think initially there was a lot of challenge going around, especially IEPs, whether they had to deliver services to families or not, and if so, how is that going to look? So it took a couple of weeks to get that ironed out, and it does end up that, as to the extent possible, a school really needs to try to provide whatever services they are able to do virtually. Of course, not every service will be able to be provided that way, but that is the law. That comes down from the federal law, not just the state law. So there was some misinterpretation, I think, around that for a little bit, but they do have to provide, as they do normally, to the extent possible. That said, it's always encouraged for the parents to keep a good log of what services have been offered and how they are offered and how often. It's a quick, easy thing to do. You can usually tell by the Zoom visit how long it's going to be and who the provider is. But that would be a very good thing, is to always keep a log. So when the kids end up back in school, they'll likely have slid backwards. Most kids do, doesn't matter if special ed or general ed. If they're not keeping up with the rigor that they were before, the tendency is to slide backwards. So that's expected. But you also want to make sure that they're being kept on track as much as possible. And if not, get remedial services down the line, not now, obviously. So that's one thing with the IEPs in particular. Same with the 504s. The 504s have to be accommodated the same way they are. It's a little bit easier via virtual visits because they're accommodations as opposed to direct services typically. So they're a little bit easier, but super important that they stay on top of them, especially when it comes to grading or expectations or amount of work, amount on a page, things like that. So both sets of people have a lot of rights, just like the school has rights. The parents have rights on both of those. Also, it's important too to keep in mind that I think schools, for the most part, do their best trying to help students on IEPs and 504s. Some have better ability than others, and that's the disparity that we all face throughout our country and our state. Some districts are much better endowed to do that than others, but it doesn't alleviate the fact that they have to provide somehow. So that's important to just stay on top of that, but also to understand that they're doing their best as much as they can, because they're also working from home. A lot of them left school and didn't realize they weren't coming back, so they don't have all their materials with them. Some schools have let some of the teachers back in, but it wasn't a mandatory. So it's been challenging on their end as well. So trying to work with them is much more helpful than not. But I do highly stress keeping a log of what services have been provided and how often, by whom, and what was done. Just each time they do it, it's just helpful for you going forward and when the next IEP meeting comes up. And speaking of IEP meetings and 504 meetings, they should be held. So if your child was due for an IEP, it still should be held. It won't be in the same form. There may not be as many team members there, but definitely, if there's an issue coming up or they're up for their annual review, yes, it should be happening. And super important as well for kids transitioning out of, say, preschool to kindergarten, kindergarten to first grade, elementary to middle, middle to high. You want to have those transition meetings. The school days look very different at each level, and those need to be in place and ready. And they can do all of that virtually. So if that's the case, ask for it so that you can get it.
Great advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
What are some other essentials that parents can put in place to really help their child, their learner, during this time, and as we move into summer, to try to stay, engaged in their learning during such a changing time right now?
I know it's so tough for everybody. I always think the very first thing is to stick with the reading. I don't care what grade level you're at, reading is essential. It is the cornerstone for everything that a child does otherwise. So reading is super important. However that may look, there are many, many websites that offer free books. You can read online. I know it's not always possible for people to do Audible or something like that, but some of those, I think Audible does do a free 30 days or something, so if you want to try something like that. But there are also, if you look on Google, there are many sites that offer free books, both for adults, middle school, high school, and young kids. So I say stick with the reading is a big one. Stay to a schedule. Like I said, kids really appreciate a good schedule. They may balk at it, but that's usually indicating that they need it. So that's a really important thing. And I also think communicating with the teachers is essential. As often as you can, I think you should. So if you're feeling unsettled or the child's feeling unsettled, your teachers actually have a lot more time now than they do when they're in the classroom with 20 or 25 kids. So I would definitely suggest reaching out to them as frequently as you need to, because they're around.
Right, and I like that. I think the reading is so important. And like you said, I've heard of some free reading or book type resources out there. So that's great. Great. Well, I really want to thank you, Meredith, for joining us and for your helpful insight and all the work you do for the NF community. It's greatly appreciated. And for those folks watching, thank you. And we'll also be providing information about how to get in contact with Meredith or in contact with NF Northeast if you have any questions. So thanks again.
You're welcome.
And stay safe, everyone.
Yes, please stay safe and keep learning.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.